The procedure that we're going to do today is a ridge augmentation to treat the area where there's a missing tooth in the lateral incisor area with loss of papillary height and some vertical dimension problem. There is a little bit of buccal dimension problem, but not much, because we have previously performed a ridge augmentation procedure, soft tissue procedure, to correct the buccal deficiency and some of the vertical. So we're doing a second stage procedure today to try to elevate the papillae into the interproximal region and cover the root exposure on the distal aspect of the central incisor, and to fill in the papilla as much as we can in that region, also to cover the root exposure at the canine. In this view, you can see the papillary loss a little bit better, and also the root exposure on the proximal surface of the central incisor. So that is an area we'd like to elevate the papilla into that embrasure space that's been created in this provisional restoration. Now we have cleaned the cement from the teeth and flossed, and what we'll do next is assess the site to see what we wish to do. And we have an ovate ponic site already where the ponic will rest into the ridge, and that's been established in the previous procedure. So we will treat that area as though it were a tooth and make our incisions as intracellular incisions around each abutment tooth, and then also make a similar incision around the pontic site so that we really are able to raise the papilla between the abutment and the ponic on each site and create a facial pouch. So we'll begin our incisions with intracellular incisions. I'll be using an Orban instrument to place these incisions and actually enter the sulcus area, and you can see there's a considerable distance to the crest. We make this incision to the alveolar crest, and that's due to loss of crestal height on the distal aspect of the central incisor, and that accounts for some of the recession that you see there. So we continue this around the central into the proximal site, and there's a very narrow papilla here, so we want to be really cautious in this region, but I want to come completely around the central and actually go into the sulcus of the adjacent central to help mobilize the papilla between the central incisors. I'll continue on the palatal aspect of the central. See that nicely. Staying within the sulcus. We'll check the length, and it looks like we're about right by the time we take up a little bit of the size in the middle portion. This actually will be placed so that it is basement membrane side facing up, and we will introduce it through the sulcus. So we'll look at the entry area, and I will make the entry through the sulcus of the central incisor. So we have the graft introduced initially, and this really is one of the more tedious parts of the procedure. Now we have the graft exposed over the canine and over the central incisor. I can find it also in the ponic area. And we have a choice of placing the provisional back on and suturing around it, which has the advantage of stabilizing the graft at the desired position and also elevating the papillae to the desired position and seeing it. But it has the disadvantage of difficulty in finding the graft in the ponic region. So I'm going to choose to suture first, and we certainly have the option that if we don't like the way it's going, to discontinue and place the provisional and do the suturing after placing the provisional. It's just advantages and disadvantages either way, and you have to decide which ones take priority. So we'll start with a suture. Now we look at the finished area after doing the augmentation, and we can see the coronal advancement of the pouch and the elevation of the papillae. It's incomplete at the mesial aspect of the ponic, because that's the area that's the greatest distance from bone and the least likely to maintain a really high position. But we have filled that papilla out facially where it had been very deficient originally, and we have advanced the tissue over the exposed root of the central incisor as well as the canine. So we've improved the area considerably. If we're able to maintain the facial position of the tissue on the central, then we will do a scalloping of that tissue, which will give us an even length of the two central incisors. I'm leaving that tissue there now because I think it helps keep the tissue in a coronal position and over the graft. If I were to scallop it now and it were to draw back, then we would have a problem of insufficient tissue on the central incisor.